In front of me was a plate with salad and chunks of roasted meat. Next to it was a glass filled to the brim with cola. Yeah, it looked good. Real good. But I couldn't force down a single bite. Meanwhile, Becky was devouring her food like she hadn't eaten in days. I felt grossed out and ashamed at the same time. Just looking at her made my stomach turn. Becky was sitting there in a dirty T-shirt that probably hadn't seen a washing machine in who knows how long. Her hands were smeared, you could say, up to her elbows in mayonnaise. And her face was covered in it too. Actually, some even got in her hair. But she didn't pay any attention to it, just mindlessly devouring the salad, occasionally smacking her lips. "Why aren't you eating?" she asked, her mouth full. "Just don't feel like it," I replied, taking a sip of cola. I have to say, that evening I never did have dinner. Becky quickly washed up, then flopped onto the bed, snuggling up to me. A sharp smell of sweat hit my nose, and something else. Something unpleasant. She laid her head on my chest, and I noticed her greasy hair. I'd heard before that some people with mental illnesses can't wash their hair. But Becky showed no signs of such an illness. She was always energetic and in a good mood. "Honey, when was the last time you washed your hair?" She thought for a moment, then said, 3. Maybe 4 days ago. "Why?" "Oh, nothing. It's just, maybe you should wash it again. That's all." She immediately jumped out of bed, put her hands on her hips, and exclaimed, "What's the matter? What are you getting at?" All of this really got on my nerves. God knows I didn't want to fight. I was just tired of all this. "When was the last time you washed that t-shirt? And your teeth? Did you brush your teeth this morning? Sometimes I can't even come near you. It's disgusting." Becky didn't say anything. She just burst into tears and ran to the bathroom. Basically, after that argument, nothing really changed. She managed to keep it up for a couple of days, and then everything went back to the way it was. But she wasn't always like this. When we were dating, I never noticed anything like that about her. She always looked neat, wore clean clothes. As for any unpleasant body odor, there was none at all. Even when we moved in together, everything was fine for the first couple of months. And only later did she slowly start to let herself go. Now I get the feeling she spends her nights sleeping on a heating pipe outside. It's like, as soon as I fall asleep, she gets dressed and rushes off at full speed to the heating pipe or the dump. I couldn't come up with any other explanation. Every time she got into bed next to me, I turned away. Actually, there were a lot of things I did that drove her crazy. I tried to eat separately from her, didn't even hug her back, didn't go anywhere with her, and intimacy disappeared from our lives too. She was worried and asked me more than once what was going on. Naturally, I told her everything just as it was, without a hint of doubt. Of course, I didn't insult her or yell, but I expressed my thoughts clearly, without beating around the bush. Becky just couldn't understand my explanation, and was constantly hurt. In short, our conversations led nowhere. And I started to feel like the only way out of this whole situation was to break up. But honestly, doing it was a lot harder than just imagining it. I don't know what exactly was stopping me from going through with it. Maybe it was the good memories. Maybe just habit. Or maybe a faint hope that things would still get better. I don't know. But our breakup kept getting postponed. And after recent events, I didn't even want to think about us splitting up. Something started happening to Becky, and I was seriously worried about her health. It all started with small things. I began to notice that her hands were always cold. Not just cold, actually, more like icy. And this was even though it was warm enough in the apartment. And one time, after taking a shower, she got into bed, and as she was settling under the blanket, she accidentally touched me with her fingers. I swear, her hands were as cold as ice. I immediately grabbed her palm with my hand and realized I wasn't imagining it. And a little later, I noticed something else strange about her. Sometimes, Becky would just stare off into nowhere. She would fix her gaze on a single spot and not even blink. Even when I was talking to her, she would look right through me. Even though she answered questions clearly and took part in the conversation. I asked her how she was feeling, wondered if she needed a doctor. But every time, I got the same answer, that nothing was bothering her. But I was definitely bothered. One day, I came home from work a little early and decided to set up a small break for us. I got some wine, ready-made food, a few other little things. I didn't tell her I was coming, since I wanted to surprise her a little. I opened the front door as quietly as possible and slipped in just as quietly. I could hear the sound of running water from the kitchen, and it seemed like Becky was chopping something on the cutting board. I tiptoed toward the kitchen. Becky still hadn't seen me. She was methodically slicing tomatoes, and at one point accidentally nicked her finger. But instead of rinsing her hand and treating the cut, she brought her finger up to her face and stared at it for a long time. I froze, and for some reason my heart started pounding loudly in my chest, as if warning me that something was wrong. She kept staring at it for a while longer, then put it in her mouth, smacking her lips as she did. What the hell is this? I couldn't think of anything else to do, except quietly slip back into the hallway, then call out that I was home. So I decided not to say anything to her, just to watch her in silence. That evening we had some wine, had dinner, and fell asleep late at night. Honestly, my mood was already ruined, but I did my best not to show it. Because of what happened, Becky and I grew distant again. But this time it was both of us drifting apart, not just me pulling away from her. She was distant, and it seemed like nothing really mattered to her. The only thing that made her get up in the morning was work. She wouldn't even touch her food, even though I tried to get her to eat. The situation was getting worse every day. Becky was wasting away before my eyes and had almost stopped eating altogether. I was worried about it, but I couldn't force her to see a doctor, and she was absolutely against it. So I decided that the answer might be in her phone. Who knows who she might have started talking to there. There were all sorts of cults, death groups, and things like that. Maybe out of naivety, she was communicating with someone from one of those groups. I decided to wait until night, and when she fell asleep to go through her phone. But as luck would have it, Becky didn't seem to be planning on sleeping at all. She kept tossing and turning, lying down, then sitting up. Basically, she was doing everything she could to avoid sleeping. At one point, she got up from the bed and left the room. She must have gone to get a drink, or to the bathroom. But no, for some reason she needed to go into another room, the one we used as a storage room. She quietly closed the door behind her, and the next minute some indistinct mumbling came from the room. I pressed my ear to the wall, but I couldn't make out a single word. I don't know what made me get out of bed and drag myself to the storage room. Honestly, the devil must have made me do it. There's no other way to put it. What I saw in the room is burned, into my memory forever. Becky was standing there in just her nightgown, saying something unfamiliar. Her words didn't sound like any language I knew. And I'm not even sure such a language exists at all. It seemed to me that she was saying words that don't exist. I kept getting closer and closer to her. She didn't even notice. Becky, no reaction. What are you doing? That question went unanswered too. I was angry. Who the hell got in her head and made her do this crap? I smacked the light switch with my hand, and then, not even trying to hide, walked around behind her. But the words got stuck in my throat. Her eyes were rolled back so far you couldn't see her pupils or irises. Just the whites of her eyes. Panicking, I started shaking her by the shoulders and screaming at the top of my lungs. She squeezed her eyes shut and went limp in my arms. And when she came to, she said she didn't remember anything. For my part, I insisted on calling an ambulance, but she calmly asked me to pull myself together, then added, "Sorry, I never told you this before. You see, when I was a child, and even as a teenager I used to sleepwalk, I thought it would go away as I got older, but now it's come back. Are you kidding me? Why didn't you warn me? I nearly died of fright when I saw you. I told you it hadn't happened in ages. That's why I didn't mention it." After that, Becky and I chatted a bit more, and then she fell soundly asleep. But I didn't sleep a wink until dawn. Basically, it was clear why the sleepwalking had come back. After all, she was barely eating and was completely lost in her thoughts. I had suggested going to the doctor more than once, even insisted on it, but all she ever said was that she'd go herself. Though, to be fair, she never specified when she would go. I took her at her word. After all, she's an adult and capable of making decisions and taking responsibility for her own life. And you can't exactly drag her to the doctor by force, since she's not a danger to anyone around her. Soon, another odd thing came to light. On Friday evening, Becky set her alarm for the morning. When I asked her where she was planning to go on Saturday morning, she answered innocently. I didn't argue with her, just nodded. But endless questions immediately started running through my mind, and there were no answers to them. Becky had been working Monday to Friday for years, and not once had she ever been called in on a weekend. There was absolutely nothing for her to do at work on weekends anyway. The place was simply closed. This situation really worried me, and I couldn't think of a better solution than to follow her. That was pretty tricky to pull off, since we lived in a private house. But I managed to slip quietly through the gate and follow her. I should mention our town is pretty small. Becky walks to work. That actually worked in my favor, because it would have been a lot harder to follow her on public transport. But that morning she didn't head to work. She took some other route. I had no idea where she was going, since her job was in the complete opposite direction. Her parents lived in a village. It's much easier to get there by bus than to walk such a long way. I didn't know exactly where she needed to go since she hadn't called anyone. Of course, how could I have missed that? She didn't even have a bag with her. My anxiety kept growing, along with a sense that something terrible was about to happen. Not just something unpleasant, something truly awful. I don't know how to explain it. I felt my muscles tense up and turn to stone. It was hard to take each breath. My ears were ringing. To my horror, I realized that the residential buildings were now behind us. Ahead, there was only a garage complex, which we soon passed as well. Becky didn't stop and kept confidently walking toward the cemetery. What could she possibly need there? It was harder to hide in the cemetery than in the courtyards. But still, I twisted and turned and kept following her. Becky walked deeper in and finally stopped by one of the graves. I hid behind a thick oak tree and held my breath, wondering what she needed at someone else's grave. Maybe a relative or someone she knew is buried here. Maybe she's performing some kind of ritual here. I don't know. No wonder she's got problems in the head. But honestly, my guesses were nothing compared to what Becky actually did. She took some shovel she'd stashed there beforehand and started digging up the grave. What the hell? What is this? I need to call the psych ward or the cops right away. But for some reason, I wasn't in a hurry to call anyone. I watched her like I was hypnotized. Maybe it was just a survival instinct kicking in, and my body decided to freeze up in a situation like that, not drawing any attention to itself. Becky was digging the earth methodically and quickly. Then she jumped down somewhere below. Suddenly, a dead head appeared out of the front pit. Lifeless eyes stared at me. It was Becky, my Becky. She was dead, and there was no doubt about it. Her skin had that telltale bluish tint. In some places, it had even peeled away from her face. I couldn't believe what was happening. How could this be? I had just seen her alive a few minutes ago. In an instant, a living girl appeared next to the dead one. I thought I was honestly losing my mind. Or maybe this is all just a dream. Maybe I'm just imagining things. I squeezed my eyes shut tightly, but the scene stayed exactly the same. The living Becky was climbing out, dragging the process stacking the corpse along with her. I don't know why she or it did that, because I no longer had any desire to keep watching all of this. I quietly tiptoed away from there, and when I'd gone about 15 meters for some reason, I looked back. The corpse was lying at the feet of Becky's double, and that double was staring right at me. The moment our eyes met, I bolted and tore off toward the city like a shot. I don't remember how I ran, and I don't remember how I ended up at home. I only remember grabbing a bottle of vodka from the fridge and downing about a quarter of it. The vodka, drunk on an empty stomach, did its job. I passed out right at the table. When I came to, I literally turned the whole house upside down and didn't forget about the browser history in my phone. In the storage room, I found candles wrapped with thick black thread and a small bag of soil. In the browser history, I noticed several tabs with searches like how to keep a man, love spell, binding, and so on. The picture in my head came together instantly. Becky had performed some kind of ritual. I gathered all her trinkets and took them to the nearest dumpster. I turned off the phone and erased the browser history. I had to figure out what to do next. Her parents would start looking for her sooner or later, unless of course she showed up to them in that state. That thought stuck firmly in my mind, so I immediately got in touch with her mother. Aunt Ira picked up the phone surprisingly quickly, which was unusual since she's usually hard to reach. "Hi there, son-in-law. How are you doing?" "Hello. I have some bad news for you. Last night, Becky and I had a fight. In the morning, she was already gone, and her phone is off. Do you have any idea where she might be?" "Of course I do. She's right here with me, having tea. Don't worry, she'll be back soon." Her words echoed in my head. "What do you mean she'll be back soon? What do you mean she's there having tea? That's not the real Becky. That thing isn't from our world." Even though my gate was locked, I still decided to play it safe and piled a bunch of things against the door so that thing couldn't get in easily. If the things fall, it'll make noise, and I'll know someone's come onto the property. Somewhere deep down, I hoped she wouldn't come, that she didn't need to anymore. With every passing hour, that hope grew stronger. No one came into the yard. No one called me. Apparently, she really did leave me alone. In the middle of the night, my sleep was abruptly interrupted. And while I was trying to figure out what exactly was keeping me awake, I heard strange noises. I had to get out of bed and go check. The noise was coming from the hallway. I turned on the light and immediately squinted. And when I opened my eyes, I saw the doorknob jerking up and down. At the sight of this, I screamed and backed away, pressing my back against the wall, while the doorknob started rattling even faster. My right hand traced across in the air, and then everything instantly went quiet. After pulling myself together a bit, I headed back to the bedroom. From the window there, I could clearly see Spada's face. She was standing there, grinning with her wide smile. And then, slowly, she rolled her eyes back. Right then, a memory flashed in my mind of how she supposedly used to sleepwalk. Apparently, my sanity couldn't take it, and I lost consciousness. I woke up from the cold, since I was lying on the floor. Right away, the scene from last night flashed before my eyes. How that thing pretending to be Spada looked in through my window. There wasn't much I could do. Not many options. I decided to go to the church and ask for help there. As soon as I stepped into the yard, I cried out and darted back into the sick house. There were dead animal carcasses lying on my property. The whole yard was strewn with them. Headless lizards, birds, cats, and the lifeless body of a dog lying on its back. At the sight of it all, tears just started streaming from my eyes on their own. I felt both terrified and sorry for those poor creatures at the same time. At the church, I briefly explained the whole situation to the priest and convinced him to bless my home. However, not everything was going so well. You wouldn't be able to come to me today, only tomorrow. And I was horrified at the thought of how I would get through the night. Somewhere on the internet, I had found information that evil spirits can't stand salt. I generously sprinkled salt on the windowsills and the threshold, and also poured the rest by the gate. I had to bury the poor animals in the backyard. I didn't dare gather up the dead bodies and take them to the dump. Someone from the neighbors would definitely see me, and they'd call me crazy on top of it. That night, I went to bed calmly, convinced that the salt would keep them away. The sound of shattering glass made me get out of bed and force my eyes open. Something flickered in the darkness, but I just couldn't make out what exactly was happening there. When I turned on the light, I screamed bloody murder. The glass was shattered, and outside the window stood more than a dozen corpses. Corpses, that's right. Some had already partially turned into skeletons, while others still looked like living people. The room was filled with a terrible putrid stench. My vision went dark. I felt nauseous, and my legs wouldn't obey me. The only thing holding the dead back was the metal bars on the window. They were sticking their hands through the bars, grabbing at anything they could reach. Yellowish stains appeared on the light-colored wallpaper, and then more stains started to appear alongside them. When feeling returned to my body, I ran out into the hallway, but the same thing was happening at another window, and the doorknob was rattling back and forth. That night, I prayed without stopping, but nothing changed. The dead only left right before dawn, and the strangest thing was that none of the neighbors saw anything suspicious. With great difficulty, I waited for the priest to arrive. He blessed my house and then left. As for me, I tried to pull myself together and stocked up on alcohol at the local store. It took me a couple of days to calm down. Before that, I hadn't even stepped out onto the porch. My supplies had run out. I had to at least make it to the grocery store, since my fridge was completely empty. When I stepped out into the yard, something made me stop right in front of the gate. Some faint, barely audible sound reached my ears. It felt like someone had scraped their foot across the asphalt. I felt my heart start to race and sweat break out on my forehead. I had to get down on my knees and look under the fence to confirm my suspicion. Dark blue high-heeled shoes appeared in the gap between the asphalt and the fence. The last time I saw Becky, she was wearing those shoes. Several months had passed since those events. The blessing ritual didn't help me, so I decided to take drastic measures. There's a men's monastery in our region. That's where I ended up moving. No, I didn't decide to become a priest and devote the rest of my life to God. I just asked them if I could stay there for a while. The dead stopped visiting me, and I never saw that thing that came in Becky's form again either. But her parents finally got worried and filed a missing person report. It's unlikely the dead will be able to bother me in this holy place